Hi, welcome to the Friday Cook-Along. I'm Roy and I work at the British Nutrition Foundation, and thanks ever so much for joining me this afternoon. I hope you've had a really good, healthy eating week at home. Today's Friday, so the challenge is to move more. So what have you done today to move more? Well, let's get cooking. So today we're going to be making homemade fish fingers and bro chips. What's bro chips? Well, they're broccoli chips. So we really hope you enjoy making these at home for yourself, your friends or your family. And they're a great thing to do, and you can be really creative when you get cooking. So we're going to have a quick look at the ingredients, but I hope you've got an apron on and you've washed your hands and you're ready to cook. You need to get the oven on, so you need to preheat that to 200 degrees centigrade or gas mark 6. The really good thing is that the fish fingers and the bro chips, they can cook in the oven at the same time, which is really handy. And both of them can actually be frozen, so you could use them another time. So let's have a quick look at the ingredients. So let's start with the fish fingers. So here I've got some white fish being filleted. There's no skin on it. There's no bones, so that's great to use. It's great as well, you can use frozen white fish too. Or actually, if you want to use oily fish too, that's great to have. And we're all encouraged, if you eat fish, to have at least one piece of oily fish a week. I've actually got some homemade breadcrumbs as well. You can grate them, or if you've got a food processor, you can chuck them in. But equally, you can buy breadcrumbs. If you don't like breadcrumbs, you could use something else. And quite often, some people actually use that crushed up breakfast cereal as a replacement. And that's really quite a fun thing to do. Just put them in a bag and then just crunch them with your hands. I've got a beaten egg and I've got some flour too. So that's really the fish fingers. But as I said, you can be quite creative. So although it's not in the recipe, what I'm going to do with my breadcrumbs, I'm actually going to add just like a teaspoon of mixed herbs, and I'm just going to gently put that into the breadcrumbs just to give my fish fingers a little bit of a herby kind of treat there. And you could be really fancy if you wanted to. You could add lemon peel, you could add spices, you could put chili in, some garlic, you know, really be creative. And then let's have a look at the bro chips. So we've got 2 potatoes here. I've actually cooked those in the microwave just for 10 minutes. And they're cooked all the way through. Of course, if you don't want to use the microwave, you could just boil them, so cut them up, boil them until they're tender. I've left the skins on, I think that's really important. Then we've got our broccoli. I've cooked that. Again, I cooked that in the microwave. That was just about 2.5 minutes. I've got some grated English cheddar cheese, the strong stuff, that's my favourite. And then I've just got an egg here as well, a medium-sized egg. So, let's start with the fish fingers and get making. Okay, so homemade fish fingers I think are quite a simple thing to do. So we've already preheated our oven, and what I've got is I've got my baking tray ready. I've got a bit of sort of greaseproof paper. If you haven't got that, don't worry, you just need to make sure that it's non-stick. If you could put a little bit of oil, perhaps a little bit of spray oil on the pan as well, that would just make sure the fish fingers don't stick in the oven. But I say I'm going to use greaseproof paper, I find that much easier. I'm just going to put that to the side. And the first thing we need to do is just to cut our fish fingers. So I'm going to get one of our fish fillets, just going to pop that here. And then I'm going to actually cut across like this rather than like that to get nice little, they're going to be small, but they're going to be fun and crunchy little fish fingers. So I'm going to use something called a claw grip. So I'm just going to hold the fish like this, and then I'm just going to cut down through the fish, making a fish finger, and then roughly about the same size again. I'm going to do that because you want to make sure that when you serve them, everybody gets the same kind of amount of fish in their fish finger. You don't want any arguments, do you, at the dinner table tonight? So we've done that one. Do another one there. That's fine. And then that one, I think I'm just going to leave that as it is. It's going to look a little bit odd, but I think that's absolutely fine. So I'm just going to put my fish over here. As it's raw, we just need to think about sort of cross-contamination and so forth on our board, but that's fine. Nothing else is going to go on this one. So I'm going to put my other piece of fish in. Yeah, and fish is natural, so it's always going to come in little slightly different shapes and sizes. So again, this is going to be quite a square fish finger, that one, but that's okay. And again, try and do it the same kind of width, cut through, again, cut through. This is actually very easy to do. If you've got kids, they probably really quite enjoy doing this. Another one here, and I think I'm going to leave that one as it is. Okay, now for the fun bit, let's actually make the fish fingers. So we've cut the fish up, and now we're going to put the coating on. I always just use one hand because I like to use the other hand free. Otherwise it might get quite sticky. So I'm going to take one piece of fish, and first of all, I'm just going to coat it in a little bit of flour. That's good. So that's about right. Make sure it's all over. Don't worry if you're a bit messy like me. Then pop it in the egg. So just going to make sure, and that's going to be a bit like kind of like glue. And then the last thing to do is just to put them into the breadcrumbs. Just really put them around up like that. And once you're happy, just pop that on your baking tray. And then you just then get going with the next one. And you just continue that process for all of the rest of the fish fingers. And there you go. That's my homemade fish fingers, and they're ready to go into the oven. And they cook for about 10-15 minutes. But I'm just going to put them to the side just for a second because I'm going to make my bro chips and then I'm going to cook them at the same time. Right then, let's get on with the bro chips, shall we? So I've got my potatoes, they're already cooked, and first of all I just need to mash them lightly. So I'm actually just going to press them with the potato masher here, and you can see they're super cooked. And you can see there's got the skin there, and I actually love Jackie potatoes, but actually all potatoes, I just keep the skin on. Just make sure you wash the potato thoroughly. Obviously, first of all, like you would do any fruit and vegetables that you're going to be using. And then, just mash away. And it doesn't really take that much. You can see here, that actually has become really easily mashed. And that's basically it. So just take the rest of the mash off of your masher, and then we'll get on with the next part. So just going to do a little bit more here. So that's looking good. Just tap that away. That's good. Move that out of the way. And the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to chop up the broccoli. So I'm going to put that just to one side. Just move my chopping board forward a little bit. We've got our broccoli here, so I'm just going to pop that on the chopping board. You don't need to worry too much. It's not have to be like a really fine chop. So again, what you can then do is you can perhaps use the bridge hold, which is like this. So you can just chop it, and then you can chop it again. Or if you feel a bit more skilled, you can then just use the claw grip and then just cut the broccoli up. Now, depending on the size that you like, you still want to make sure, obviously, it looks like broccoli in the bro chips. So just cut away. And I'm using my nails there, as you can see, as the guide. It's just to make sure you've got a safe way of doing it. Now, I'm using broccoli. It's one of my favourites. But of course, you can use pretty much any other vegetable you have, which is fine. For example, you could actually use frozen mixed veg, and that's very economical. Frozen peas, or perhaps you've got canned vegetables, they'll be good, as well as obviously using any other fresh vegetable that you have. Probably some of you are thinking, well, aren't these kind of like croquettes, or perhaps, a bit like Bubble and Squeak? I remember having that as a kid. And that obviously used lots of leftovers, so leftover mash, leftover perhaps, vegetables from the Sunday roast. And we always had those in our house. Okay, so I've chopped up my broccoli now, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just pop that in with the mashed potato. So here we go, just pop the broccoli directly into the bowl. Looking really nice. I think a bit escaped there. I'll come back and get that in a sec. Just put that to one side, just pop that in. I've got a clean worktop. Then simply, I'm just going to add my cheese. That's that one. And then I'm going to add my egg. And then really, you just mix everything together. Good. It might get a little bit sticky, as you can see, but I'm going to just show you a quick way in a moment about how you can make sure you kind of don't get super messy with this. But actually, it actually makes a really kind of nice, it's almost like a dough, I suppose, which is good. And then really, that's it. I mean, that is everything kind of mixed together really quite simply. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take the mixture, we're going to make our bro chips, and then we're going to pop them onto a lined or a greased baking tray. So the next step then is obviously you're going to make your chips. Now you need to make sure that you could do it by hand, for example, get it even and put them in and shape them. What I'm going to actually do, I'm going to use an ice cream scoop, which I find really helpful because it will make sure everything is of a uniform size. So it's a bit like an old-fashioned, sort of like some of you might remember sort of school dinners, and then you had like a couple of scoops of mash. And this is just a way of making sure that all of your bro chips are going to be the same size. So So I'm just going to do a few here just to show you, and then I'll show you about shaping them. So don't worry too much if there's a little bit around the side there. So if I'm just going to make 6 on this baking sheet, and then next step is we're going to shape them. So the next step is to shape them into chips. One little top tip I've got is I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on my hands, and just to stop it sticking so much. So literally you take one of your chips and then sort of roll it like that. And it is more like a croquette, I know, but you can have fun. And there's one of my chips, and you just carry on doing that. And the mashed potato is really kind of pliable, so you can make your chips. And of course, you'd now be able to get more than 6 on this baking sheet. And you just continue this all the way through with all of your potato mix. So I'm just going to finish these off, and I'll see you just in a second. Thanks. So here you have them. I managed to get 12 bro chips out of that mixture. You could probably spend a little bit more time really making them chip-like, but I quite like these, a little bit rustic, I suppose. And then now we need to bake them. So like the fish fingers, they take around 10 to 15 minutes. So we're going to pop them in the oven. Here's my fish fingers that I got. So both of them in the oven at the same time, and we'll see you in about 10-15 minutes. So here's my fish fingers just out of the oven. So I've already got some peas, which I quite like to have with my fish and bro chips. So I'm just going to put a couple of those on my plate. They're smelling really good. I'm just going to now go and get my bro chips from the oven. And here's the bro chips. I think they're looking really good. You can see like the cheddar cheese has really kind of come through them, giving them a little golden brown. So pop those on, and you can still see the broccoli, which I think is really fun. So I'm gonna have 3 of those. I think they look really good. So I really hope you enjoyed making your fish fingers and bro chips. And I think got one more thing to do. Of course, got to have a little bit of tomato sauce with those. I think that's looking good. So I really hope you enjoyed cooking with us at BNF this week in BNF Healthy Eating Week at home. We've really enjoyed putting everything together on our website. And of course, if you want any more information, just go to nutrition.org.uk. Or if you've got kids or are involved in food education, go to foodeffectivelife.org.uk. So today's Friday, but Healthy Eating Week at home doesn't stop today. So tomorrow, it's all about being mind-kind, being good for yourself, but also being supportive for friends and neighbours. Perhaps you could share some of the food that you've made this week. And on Sunday, it's about make a change. So just think about what you've learned this week and what you can do for the future. So really, it's over to you, and enjoy your cooking, and thanks ever so much for joining us. Bye.